Hello, everybody. This is Sophia Mona Lisa of the Rose Wheel Mystery School and the Golden Ray Center. And today we are going to be doing a lot of work around the Venus Morning Star Crown Chakra activation, which is known as the Portal of Authority, also called the Gate of Authority. And we are going to be doing the activation for the 13th and 14th strands of DNA. So I'm just going to quickly stop the share so you can see everybody that's here. Hold on a second. So here we all are. And I just want to say how super duper excited I am that we are officially launching the Leo Goddess Journey with today's gathering. And so the actual gate activation was earlier in the month, and due to several things that happened, it got postponed and postponed again so that we could all be here. So it is a little bit later in the month than we would normally do it. But this is the first stage of the Venus synodic cycle. We call that the Venus morning star phase, and it's also known as the descent phase. And when that phase begins, it always starts here at the crown chakra. That's the first gate activation, and that's what we're working with today. So I'm really super excited about that. Now, if you've been following along with all of the work that we did through the 19 months of the Capricorn goddess, this Leo goddess and the work that we do here together is going to look and feel very different. It's going to be different in terms of content, and we're doing something very different in terms of the ceremonial / experiential piece. So the tier 2 members, I'm speaking to you directly. You're going to get the recorded piece for all of the teaching. And because this Leo goddess journey is going to be probably at least 10 times more potent than the Capricorn journey, and because the work that we're going to be doing is going to be profoundly deep transformational work, we as the Galactic New Earth tribe, those of us that you see here, made a decision that it felt safer for us to have all of the experiential work that we're doing in our sacred circle private, so that everybody here in the circle can feel supported and secure enough to be able to go as deep as they are able to, and to be as vulnerable as they need to be. So you will not be seeing those parts of our work as you did in the past with the Capricorn goddess. So I just wanted to share that piece with you. And we're all on the same page. We wanted to bring you on the same page. So as always, Gaias, gorgeous Gaias, feel free to ask questions as they come up so that it feels more conversational and less like a schoolroom lecture. And if you get down the road and you're like, oh, I forgot to ask that, and we've moved on, just jot it down on a piece of paper, because I do have a slide at the end for us to do questions and answers. So we've got some really great stuff to share today. And with that, I'm going to share the screen and take us over there. Okay. Now, for everybody that will be seeing this replay and is watching now, I want to remind you that all of the work that we are doing is aligned with this Leo goddess journey. And on my website, this is the URL, you can see the entire schedule for the entire 19-month journey of when these gate activations are happening. I've also included, because it's relevant to our work now, as you'll see as we move forward, all of the Mercury inferior conjunctions. And I've also embedded the solar and lunar eclipses. So this page of my website that I've always had available has been really taken to a whole new level by putting in this additional information. The other thing is, and let me just stop the share for a moment so you can see this. The other thing is, let me change the view so I can come up and it'll be larger, is that I was guided, and it's been validated in numerous ways, that the 12th strand of DNA was not the completion of the activations, that we are going to be activating 33 strands of DNA through this Leo goddess journey. And this book came into my field at the time that I was being given that information, and it's about 22 ancient star signs, and it's called the Lost Zodiac. And so we are going to be looking at those star signs and the star at the time of the event within that sign that is influencing the activations, and they will really be playing a role with the DNA regeneration. And so you'll see here in blue next to each of these which ancient star sign is influencing the event, and it's in these gatherings that I will look at those and then give you the additional information on the specific star within that constellation or that sign that is influencing us. So this right here out the gate is a huge shift from what we did in the Capricorn goddess by looking at these light frequencies from these different luminary bodies in terms of how they are facilitating what we're doing. Okay, so this is the URL, goldenraycenter.com/Leo-goddess-journey / you can go there anytime to see where we are in the journey. Now, just be aware that the dates are the dates of the actual activation in the sky. Our ceremonial and gathering time will be, before or after, depending on when it lands, and maybe on the day, but likely not. So just be aware that the ceremonial piece is not these dates. These dates are related to the actual events in the sky. Okay. So here we are, back to the template that Yeshua gave to me at the resurrection point of the metamorphic underworld and in the Gemini goddess journey, where it became clear to both Maureen, who you'll see a little bit later, and myself, that the myth of Inanna, which has been the historical template for the Venus synodic cycle, was no longer relevant. And then when we made that Yeshua gave me this template to work with. And so this slide here actually takes us through this Leo goddess morning star phase, the descent phase, and into the Inanna underworld phase, which is the second phase. And so what we see is, if we start up here at the top, this was August 13th, last month, when we all got together for our immersive breath retreat to bring on this 12th strand of DNA at that metamorphic underworld sea point. So now as you go down, you can see when the Leo goddess rose for the first time to be seen as morning star. That happened on August 19th. That event activated this 13 strand of DNA, and I do have slides related to this activation, and this is why this particular gathering is about the regeneration and activation of both the 13th and the 14th strands. And then on September 11th, this month, was that first gate activation at the crown. And we know when these gate activations happen because the moon and Venus come together in the sky. Now, what's really important to recognize is with the template that Yeshua gave me, that when the morning star, when Leo rose as morning star, when we first saw her in the sky, it was happening around the soul star. Historically, the crown chakra activation is the signal, the point for when the Venus synodic cycle starts. But notice at this point, we had access, and this 13th strand, isn't that a synchronicity? Gives us access to the Christ frequencies. And of course, the spiritual gifts of the Christ frequency is what they call in Sanskrit, Ananda consciousness. And Ananda means bliss. This is what most people, when they're talking about full enlightenment, full liberation, the Sanskrit word is moksha. This is what they're referring to. So this is significant, and you'll see that when I talk about the stars and the star signs. Now, at this crown chakra, we have, because we know the Christ has a Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. At the crown chakra, we've got access to that realm of the Father aspect of Christ. And the spiritual gift of this aspect is the unity consciousness. And that is also encoded in this 14th strand of DNA. And as we go forward in our journey, each month we will move down, 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 down until we complete this slide. And then I have a whole nother slide where we go up, 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 up for the Leo goddess evening star and the metamorphic underworld phase. So we will be working with this slide and its companion slide through the entire 19-month journey, just to keep it's a tracking tool. And you know, in my alchemical creation high priestess process, when we were dealing with the Capricorn energies in terms of the elements, earth, air, water, fire, and spirit or ether, in terms of manifesting, one of the important pieces of the earth element as we're manifesting things is to be able to track. So that's why this is so significant for us. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to step back to that August 19th event. And isn't it, again, synchronistic that we started our immersive breath retreat on August 13th when that metamorphic seed point occurred and the 12th strand came online. And we ended on August 19th, the following Saturday, when Venus rose as morning star in Leo. And of course, that was associated with this 13th strand. So I find that, again, all of these synchronicities, because I didn't sit down with a calendar and look at this and plan it out. It all just kind of fell together. And so I love to see these synchronicities come together on their own without me trying to figure it all out. Okay, so here is the chart. This is the chart of when Venus rose as the Leo morning star. And you can see that here. And so how do we know? This is the question. How do we know? What is the signal in the sky that Venus is rising as the Leo morning star? Well, the first signal is, depending on where you're living, you're going to see her just above the horizon in the morning. But a lot of people can't see that depending on where they are on the globe or on the planet. And so there's a more precise way to know that. And of course, it goes back to what's happening between the sun and Venus. And so when Venus moves out of, let's say, the shadow of the sun, and it takes 10 degrees at least for her to move out of the shadow of the sun and to be seen in that morning sky, that's the signal that Venus has risen as the morning star. So I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but you'll notice here that the sun is at 26 degrees 39 minutes, and that Venus here is at 16 degrees 39 minutes. That's that 10-degree orb. And you'll notice that they are conjunct Lilith. And if you've been watching the other videos, you know now that Lilith in Leo is a placeholder for Thecla. And I've talked about her in other videos that you can go back and look at. And then here's the star. This is the star that is sending its frequencies to this 13th strand DNA. And so this star is called Alphard. And I'm going to talk about Alphard and the ancient sign that Alphard is a part of in some slides coming up. So what's really big about this 13th strand DNA activation and regarding Leo goddess rising as morning star is that her placement is squaring Jupiter in Taurus. Venus is at 16, Jupiter is at 15, and there's some minutes there I don't see because of the symbols here. And Jupiter, of course, is I don't know if he's retrograde yet. I didn't put it here and I can't see here because shortly after this, Jupiter did move into retrograde motion. So this is the big deal for this Leo morning star rising event, because we know that squares are breakthroughs in consciousness. We know from the work that we did that when the Leo morning star rose, that was, in terms of the work that we've been doing, that was the signal that the 3D compassionate heart field had been alchemized to the 5D plus awakened divine heart. And of course, we know this. Leo represents the compassionate heart. And so with this square to Jupiter, that breakthrough in consciousness also signals that breakthrough from the 3D heart field to the 5D plus heart field. And it's in Taurus. So being able to embody this higher frequency heart field within us, and Jupiter as the cosmic guru, as the one that amplifies everything he comes into contact with in an exponential way, also creating the space within our inner realm to be able to hold the frequencies of that awakened divine heart. So this was a huge, huge activation that took place. And what's beautiful, as we know now, if you've been watching the videos that I did through August and September, is that this kite that I've talked a lot about, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on now, was still in full effect, of course, because this was September 11th. And we see that in the tail of the kite, we have the Celtic horse goddess Epona. We've got Mercury, the cosmic messenger. We've got Mars, the sacred masculine, and we've got Isis as the cosmic Sophia. So this kite is also supporting, as you can see here, this breakthrough in consciousness and all of these spiritual gifts. I'm not going to take the time to speak to now in terms of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. I've done videos on that. You can go back and look. But what's happening in the tail, helping us to lift off, right? The kite has to lift off. And so these are the luminary bodies that are assisting us in lifting off from this 3D field of heart consciousness to this 5D plus field of heart consciousness. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so before I go on, here, I want you to go back. I want to remind you that I did do a video on this event. It's on Patreon. This is the name of it. If you want more information, you can go back and rewatch that. But before I go forward, what I want to do is I want to stop the share, because that was a whole lot of information. And you guys may be having like ahas and downloads and clarity around everything I said, or you may have questions. And so let's just give ourselves the space right now while it's fresh and we're discussing it, that anything you might want to ask or contribute around this, to go ahead and do that. Helen.
Jupiter went retrograde September 4th.
Okay, so it was retrograde. Thank you. So at that Leo goddess rising, it was retrograde. Thank you. Anybody else have anything that they want to say about that event? Or, if you think back what you were experiencing with that event, or any questions around anything I shared. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so just reminding you again that video is out there. I did do a video on that event. Now, let's talk about the star and the ancient star sign. So the ancient star sign is called the sea serpent, and you can see it here. That's the sea serpent. It's also known by the name of Hydra. I just prefer the sea serpent name, but you can also call it Hydra. You'll also hear it referred to as Hydra. And so here we see it in the sky with all of the stars in it. And this is the location of the star Alphard that was influencing that Leo goddess as she was rising as morning star. So let's dig a little deeper into the sea serpent and into Alphard. Okay. Now, the sea serpent is the largest constellation in the heavens. And I know that a lot of people think that Draco is the largest constellation. Well, those are the ones that they work with. They don't work with these ancient 22 signs. So it turns out that actually the sea serpent is the largest constellation, and it stretches from Cancer to Libra. Now, what's fascinating is that on the back of the sea serpent, you have this sign here, Corvus, also known as the raven, and crater, also known as the cup, sitting on its back. This is going to become relevant further down in the slide, so just keep that in your mind. Now, the winding course of the sea serpent back in the very ancient times once symbolized the path of the moon. And this is significant to recognize because the Sumerians, who worshipped the goddess Namu, the great mother, recognized this pathway. And we, of course, recognize the moon being associated with, if it's your ancient lineage, the great mother. And if it's not your ancient lineage, the divine mother. So, or even in your mundane world, your own mother. So this is an interesting tie-in here. And you know, the Sumerians at approximately 4100 BC, that's over 6,000 years ago. That's how ancient this wisdom is around this constellation being associated with the Great Mother. Now, Namu was personified as the primordial ocean from which all life emerged. And this is kind of another way of speaking to what the Hindus talk to as, you know, the cosmic void through which, or the cosmic egg through which all life has emerged. And it just happens to turn out that the sea serpent is the symbol of this mother goddess, Namu. Now, what's fascinating is a few months back, Elena Denon went to Mesopotamia on a journey to this very region of Sumeria. And she did a kind of a video journal through her trip. And the very last journal, the finale, she speaks to the Sumerians. She finds the descendants of the Sumerians, and they still, to this day, use this iconography of the sea serpent to represent the sea mother. So this is more corroborating evidence around this history with this constellation. And I will put a link in the description box below to this video if you're interested in learning more about that. Now, further forward in history, in Babylon, which was, you know, another 2,000 years on, the Babylonians recognized the sea serpent as the source of the fountains of the deep. Well, you know, when you're talking about fountains of the deep, to me, that's another way of saying the ocean, okay? And so those that know about the sea serpent constellation do say that this constellation is associated with the water element, and that makes sense. We've got, in terms of our own zodiac, the 12 signs, and the water elements, we have Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. And so those born under this sign have this, they in the way that they are, because of the influence of this sign, personify the boundless ocean. Well, that ties back to what we know about people that have a very strong Piscean influence, because Pisces is known as the great ocean. We talk about in terms of the individuation of our souls being analogous to the wave that rises out of the ocean. And of course, in a more general terms, Pisces is known as the source field, right? The great creator, from which all life comes. And so there's a lot of tie-ins over this 6,000 year period that make these same acknowledgments to this constellation as being related to the Great Mother. And that's really super significant. So when we go forward now and we want to look at Alphard, what's interesting is that Alphard marks the heart of the sea serpent. Well, what's happening at this event? We are working with the heart field, the 3D heart field being alchemized and being brought to a higher vibrational frequency to this 5D plus heart field. I mean, this is a synchronicity that cannot be overlooked, cannot be dismissed. This is highly significant, particularly in terms of the light frequencies that Alphard is encoding in this 13th strand of DNA that is about this awakened divine heart. Now, Alphard is called the solitary one, and that's going to become relevant in just a moment. But the people that are born between August 16th and the 23rd, who traditionally identify as being born in the sign of Leo, their sun sign in Leo, this small group of people, or these people born in this small time frame, the 16th to the 23rd, they are ruled by this star. And then, of course, it goes to say that they are also influenced by the sea serpent constellation. Now, in the sky, in the zodiac, which is where you saw it earlier when I pointed it out on the chart, it's located at Alphard. The star is located at 27 degrees of Leo. And so the reason it's called the solitary one is because for these people born with this star influence, it is in solitude that they often find it easiest to tune into the deep waters, which are not disturbed by passing storms. Now, this is also kind of a reference to Scorpio, because Scorpio as a water sign is about going deep, 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 deep. And we know if you're a diver, I'm not a diver, but I've heard about this. You know, if the deeper you go into the ocean, right, the more still the waters become. All of the waves and all of the activity on the surface is not influencing or affecting you in those depths. And so this is significant because of the fact that, you know, we are associating this with this 13th strand, which is influenced by these, with that Christ aspect of Ananda consciousness, bliss. The deeper you go into meditation, right, which is taking you deeper and deeper within yourself, they call that the hub of the wheel. When you get out from the frame of the wheel and moving along the spokes, you're no longer feeling the bumps along the road. When you get to that hub, you're in that silent place where you can experience that Ananda connection. So that's super, super significant. So before I move on, again, just want to stop the share here and let everybody have an opportunity to share any ahas, anything coming up around it, or ask any questions. Yes. Karen?
Go ahead, Nicole.
Okay. Go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, so the diving analogy was interesting to me because I am a diver and I do that. And the deeper you go, the stiller the water gets, the more you're internally focused, but also the more pressure builds, right? It's compressing you into yourself, bringing you deeper within yourself. So I don't know if anybody's known, but as you move down in diving, you actually compress. And so when you're coming back up, it's like a decompression as you're coming back out of that state. And so I think it's very interesting that you use the diving analogy, because this is a point where we're all going really compressing and trying to go inward into our own selves. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, you're
It is.
absolutely right. And thank you for sharing that phenomenon that even more so highlights this process.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Karen?
I was just going to point out the obvious, that emotions have historically been associated with water.
Mhm.
And we go in to find those feelings, because some of us have a harder time touching in with our feelings than others do.
Mhm.
Like you said, still waters run deep, but also I noticed symbolism. The sea serpent has been hijacked and demonized. It's in their symbols everywhere. And that really hit me when I saw that.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, we know historically that the serpent, whether it's the sea serpent or a land serpent, is the symbol for our Kundalini energy. And of course, that's why it's been hijacked, because they want to disempower humanity to make sure that they don't activate their Kundalini.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that awareness. Maureen, do you have anything you'd like to say about this star or its constellation?
No, I have a book on the stars that I've been using because of previous classes where we do associate stars with within our chart, and so I'm excited that we're going to be doing that, and forgot what I was going to say. Anyway, yes, I am excited about the stars because they absolutely influence us, and they can be in our charts, or they can be in the gates where they influence the gates, which we are engaging. So it's an extremely important part.
Right.
And I'm so grateful. Yeah,
Well, and thank you for making that remark, because in this particular activation, it's in the orb of that Sun and Venus marker in the sky that's showing that the Leo goddess has risen as morning star. In the next chart, when we look at the crown chakra activation, the star is not in the gate. So it doesn't mean that we're not getting influenced, but it can be within it, and it may not be within it. So thank you for bringing our awareness to that piece in terms of what's happening with the star.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Helen, did you want to share anything?
I have this book. It's called,
Hold on a second. Let me put it on the change the view so everybody can see it. Okay, go ahead.
it's called Uranus Mirror, A View of the Heavens. And you're supposed to get 32 cards with this, but I didn't get the cards. I just have the book. But this is the book that tells the story to the plate that you just showed.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Maybe you can email us the name of that book, so if we're interested, we can
I'd
get
love to try to find the cards, but you never know how all this works. But anyway, yeah. I was doing a session with a friend of mine in New Zealand on the muses, and somehow in through all the muses, I forget which one, that's how we came across this. But I was able to go online and download a lot of the pictures that go with the book, which is another project that's on hold, that's sitting back there in another pile of to put the pictures with the book. Oh God.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, anyway, yeah, okay, but this is a good companion to go with the other book. 'Cause
Yes.
it's all in there.
Right.
I think, I mean, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And which all fits back into as above, so below, because
Sure.
there are even all these star figures on Earth in different places around the Earth,
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's
which
true.
we know from Hugh.
Yes. Yes. Now, this book also has a companion piece of star charts or pictures. And for the sea serpent, this is the card. And you can see where Alphard is right there at
Yeah.
the heart.
How did you get the cards? Because when I got the book, I didn't get the cards.
When I ordered this book, I saw an option that allowed you to get it with these cards. And I thought, well, of course I want to get the cards.
Well, so did I, but I guess I lost out on the auction. Maybe that was the only, I don't know. Anyway, all right, so.
Yeah.
Well, but I still think the pictures that go with this book are way cooler in my opinion.
Okay.
But they probably couldn't cut the one like you showed.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the card for the sea serpent. Just
Yeah.
so everybody can see it again. There you go. So I love these cards, and they have a little spiel on the back, but it's like a very abbreviated spiel from what's in the actual book. So nothing in terms of additional information, I guess is what I'm saying, than what's already in the book.
Yeah.
So does anybody have anything else that they'd like to say around Alphard as the luminary body that is encoding its light frequencies into this 13th strand of DNA? Okay. So I will go back to the slides. All right. So now here we are, September 11th. Isn't that an auspicious day? When we had this crown chakra activation happening at 13 degrees of Leo. And so this is the thing that's important to understand about the morning star journey, also known as the descent phase, in terms of what's transpiring through this phase. In the descent phase, as we go from chakra to chakra to chakra, all the way down to, in this journey, to the Earth Star chakra, what's transpiring is that anything in your crown chakra field that no longer serves you with respect to the frequencies that this Leo goddess is bringing in is being cleared out. It's kind of like housekeeping work, right? You got to do your spring cleaning here so that by the time we get to the ascent phase and all of those activations are happening through each chakra, by the time we get to the crown chakra again, it'll have been cleaned up and prepared to receive all that activation is bringing in. So because we're cleaning out, we're letting go, it is an alchemical process, and we're going to speak more about that later on. So this crown chakra has to do with this 14th strand of DNA activation. And so let's look at the chart. So here we see Moon and Venus. I've told you before, whenever Moon and Venus come together, that signals the gate activation. Okay. It is also squared to this Jupiter retrograde, just like the Leo morning star. Oh, Helen, I got my dates confused. hold on a second.
Yeah, September 4th, I said was the Jupiter retrograde.
September 4th. Okay. So
So
the
it wasn't retrograde in August.
it wasn't retrograde in August, that Leo goddess rising, Jupiter was not retrograde. But by the time we get to this crown chakra activation, now Jupiter is retrograde. I don't know if you can see that teeny tiny R. That's a huge shift in energies regarding this square. Okay, that's a huge shift of energy, because this is bringing us from the external world where the awakened divine heart came online, to the internal world where now we're embodying it and creating the space to embodiment. So that is a huge shift and difference between these two events. Now, the star that's involved with this gate activation is the star Alkes, and this is super spectacular. It just so happens that that star is now at the tail of this kite. So this is really incredible to see how even in the sky, it's showing that Alkes with this kite aspect is encoding this 14th strand of DNA. So that's super, super huge. What's also important to see at this particular juncture with all of these kites, because some of the kites had Neptune and Pluto retrograde, but Uranus was direct. Some of the kites, then Uranus became retrograde, like we can see here. All of this is retrograde energies. This is these spiritual gifts that I talked about in that video are all happening within us. This is all about this inner work where these strands, higher strands, the frequencies of these higher strands of DNA are integrating with us, and our capacity to expand our inner space to embody those frequencies. And so let me just see what's next. Oh, here, this is the video I did that's on Patreon that talks specifically to the spiritual gifts that these three luminary bodies here at the top of the kite have to do with. And remember, I'll just say it here, remember that the backbone of this kite is on that Virgo Pisces axis, and it has been traditionally known as the path of the helpmate. And Sophia herself gave me the information that in its evolved form, that this is the path of Sophia Christ consciousness. So all of this ties in. So I just want to stop the share again and see, does anybody have any questions or any insights into the chart of this crown chakra activation? Okay. All right. Now, this is the sign that is the influence of this event. Crater. Remember I said before, Crater and Corvus are on the back of the sea serpent, and to keep that in mind because it'll be relevant. Well, it just so happens that at this event, September 11th, the crown chakra activation, Crater, also known as the cup, is the sign that's influencing that event. And in that sign, this star, Alkes, which is located right here, is the star that's influencing it, sending its luminary, its light frequencies to encode this 14th strand of DNA. So let's talk about crater, and then we'll talk about Alkes. Okay. As I mentioned, the crater constellation is also known as the Cup. Now, there are two different myths about this. There's a myth that calls it Dionysus's cup, and there's a myth that calls it Apollo's cup. And what I find interesting about it is both Dionysus and Apollo are sons of Zeus, but they lead completely different lifestyles, have completely different personalities. Personally, in between these two myths, I prefer the myth regarding Apollo, because Apollo was known as the god of the sun and light. And of course, the sun is the ruler of this Leo goddess journey. So I think that that's probably telling. The other part for why I prefer this myth is it's through this myth that we understand why Crater, Corvus, and the sea serpent are up here together. So I'm not going to go into that now, but you can look that up. But there is a tie-in there. Now, this cup also represents the Holy Grail. And we know that the Holy Grail can bring spiritual illumination. This ties back again to what's happening with this 13th and 14th strand. At the 14th strand, which is the father aspect, I don't recall off the top of my head because everything's like out here, what that spiritual gift was. If anybody recalls, if you can just let me know. But it certainly ties into the illumination of this awakened heart as well. Now, the cup is also associated with the cauldron of Bron the Blessed, which is a Welsh mythology. And I like this word cauldron because when we're dealing with alchemy, that is a word that comes up. But in this Welsh mythology around Bran or Bron the Blessed, the cauldron is a magic cauldron that can restore the dead to life. Well, even this piece, which relates to Scorpio, right? And Pluto, that's the ruler of Scorpio, the phoenix that burns to ashes and then rises from the dead. Also Scorpio and Pluto dealing with alchemy. So this is an interesting tie-in terms of the alchemical piece. And of course, it's right here at the Crown Chakra, that first gate activation where we're going to be beginning the alchemical process, as you will soon see. Now, those individuals that are born under this ancient star sign seek comradeship with those who share a common vision, such as maybe a life goal of attaining the Holy Grail. And so these individuals have a thirst for meaning in their life, and they are idealists at heart. And this is interesting because these are traits that are very similar to people who have strong Sagittarian influences in their chart, because they're always seeking the highest truth, the highest ideal. And so there are some very interesting correlations there. Now, in terms of the star, Alkes, this star ruler portends eminence for those born under its influence. And if you'll remember, I did a whole video around self-eminence. So I just love how these pieces keep showing up and weaving in. Now, this time period for the people that are ruled by Alkes, are influenced by Alkes, is for people that are born between the 11th to the 21st of September. Now, of course, that is during a time that we call Virgo. And as you saw in the chart, with Alkes in the tail of the kite, it was in fact located at 24 degrees of Virgo. Now, the people that are under the influence of the stars have prophetic abilities and a gift. And I mean like a big gift, something precious that is carried by the individual to pass down to the generations of the family. I love this because it ties back to what I said up here about the entire constellation having these similar traits to Sagittarius, because the Lord of Sagittarius is Jupiter. And Jupiter is always known that whenever you have a huge Jupiter engagement, whenever you come through it on the other side, Jupiter always leaves a boon, a gift. So a lot of tie-ins regarding that, and it's giving us a clue into the kinds of spiritual gifts that may be unlocked by Alkes activating or sending its codes to this 14th strand of DNA. So hold on a second. So what may very well happen is two things. One, you may have a gift show up that may take you by surprise because you would have had no clue that you had the ability to do that. And actually, that happened to me very recently. Two, any of your heightened senses like being able to go from normal sight, hearing, etc., to clairvoyance, to clairaudience, clairsentience, where you actually feel things that are happening, that may also unfold if you're not already experiencing it, or maybe another clair will come online, or maybe the clair that you have been experienced becomes much more acute and highly refined. So these are some of the things that could be happening with this 14th strand of DNA. So before I move on, again, just want to give everybody here an opportunity to share your insights, ahas, make comments.
My son was born on September 11th. And that's kind of exciting to see that this star definitely will influence him. And I have read and I know that those born on that day have been trying to take it back and make it a day of celebration, rather than continually being in a whirlpool of grief. It's a real tricky situation because you do want to honor those who died, but at the same time, you want to celebrate life.
Right, right. And isn't that fascinating, Maureen? Because let me go back here to the slides and point out how even that piece that you're sharing ties in with this cauldron of Braun the Blessed, right? Restoring dead to life.
Right.
So how are we restoring this day in terms of going from the grief of honoring the death to the celebration of honoring life? I mean, I mean, come on, you can't make that up. Yeah, yeah. Does
Wonderful.
anybody else have anything they'd like to share around this constellation and this star? Okay. All right. So because we are specifically working with the crown chakra, I do want to speak more to that gate activation squaring Jupiter retrograde in Taurus, just in general terms here at this portal of authority. So we are being offered a breakthrough in consciousness to restore ourselves from the death of the 3D compassionate heart field to the life of the 5D plus awakened divine heart field, to facilitate and embody our spiritual illumination, which Alkes in the tail of the kite is showing us there. So what I've said to other people that have worked with me on a personal way more recently is that now that this heart space has been alchemized into this higher vibrational set point, to this awakened divine heart, now we can have this alignment with our over self, some people call it, with source, where we are much more easily able now to be able to have these spiritual illumination experiences. So we can see that all of that is unfolding with this square that is allowing those breakthroughs in consciousness. Okay, I've been alluding to this piece, and this is the second big piece that is very, very different from the Capricorn goddess journey, because now we're bringing in alchemy and we're bringing in the alchemical process. And my soul sister, Maureen, who I think is an expert in this area,
Can you be?
is going to speak to all of this. And so let me just say this before Maureen takes over. You know that Maureen and I come from the same priestess lineage. In fact, let me stop the share and show you this book. The priestess lineage that we are a part of is a lineage that Nicole Christine downloaded and initiated. And she wrote this book. It's called Under Her Wings, The Making of a Magdalene, that describes how all of that transpired. And I've read it several times. I highly recommend it. So when Nicole Christine started, she started with the priestess process, and then the women that were working with her through the priestess process were inspired for her to see if she could take it another level to the high priestess process, which she did do. Now, one of the women that was with her at the time, Lisa Michaels, then took that process to an even higher level. She called it the creation goddess level. I worked under her with my high priestess process, which was called alchemical creation high priestess. So I got a pretty good, teaching study of alchemy. But this third level that she created, the creation goddess level, was all about alchemy. And that's what Maureen did. She did it not only once, but she did it twice, which is why I consider Maureen the expert in alchemy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to the screen, to the slides here. And I hope that was a good introduction to Maureen, because she will be with us now at each gathering teaching the alchemy. And then those of us in the tribe will be doing an experiential piece with the alchemy. So here you go, Maureen. Here's your first slide. And when you're ready for me to move on, just let me know. So when you speak, you should come up. There you go.
Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? I hope. Okay. All right. Thank you. My introduction to alchemy prior to Lisa Michaels was in Egypt in 2009. And I didn't know anything about alchemy. I didn't know what I was experiencing. I did understand chakra gates a little bit, but I hadn't started on my path at all. And this, as Capricorn, I'm a late bloomer. And so I was in my 60s when I went to Egypt, early 60s. And we went to the pyramids and to the museum in Cairo, um, and it was good. And I felt the energy. It's one of the only places I've ever felt the energy of the land. It's very powerful. And then we sailed on the Nile up to Luxor. Now, Luxor has a much more feminine energy to it. And we went into the complex of Karnak. And part of Karnak in the back is the Holy of Holies of Sekhmet. And she is a solar goddess. You can see on her head, she wears the solar disc. And so we went into this room. You can see it is relatively narrow. It is not a large auditorium style room because as Holy of Holies, she only allowed her high priestess to come in. But we went in and totally not knowing Sekhmet and not knowing anything about how she worked. We gathered in a semicircle around her and we began to have a sound healing experience with an instrument of one of those big flutes. I can't think of what they call them right now, and as he went around with his instrument and pointed it at everybody for the sound healing part, I began to feel an extreme discomfort, really discomfort. And as he continued around the circle, giving everybody a very special healing with the music, I finally broke down. I just could not deal. And I was standing between two people, a young man on my left and a young woman on my right. And we were all holding hands. And I began to feel the energy come in from each of them, a masculine force, a strong warrior energy, and a very feminine, beautiful, nurturing force on my right. I came to find out that those two were children of mine in Egypt at this time, and they were supporting their mother. And I just was crying and crying, and nobody else was. It was just absolutely crying, and I lost my entire ability to walk. I had to be escorted. We all went up to the statue to have our picture taken. My picture is weird because I'm crying so much, and I'm holding on to her, trying to stand up. And when I let go and walked out, I had to be helped. And I stood in the anteroom of the Holy of Holies, and I thought, what was that? What happened to me in there? Nobody else had this experience. But I know now that it was like a cosmic 2x4. She said, it's time. You are now going to be initiated on this path. And everything that I held was burned to the ground, including my ability to move. I've never felt anything like that. I just get teary looking at this figure. And I knew that she was in there. I knew she was with us. And anybody that was willing to become initiated in this way, she would have done it. But nobody was. There wasn't anybody. And I didn't even know I was. But obviously I was. And my intention had always been to feel the energy of this ancient land. So be careful what you set your intentions for, because it may not come in exactly the way you think. But I stood outside. I had to be helped outside, and I put my hands up against a rock, and I stood there for 20 minutes or more until I felt some strength in my leg. One of the ladies stayed with me, and she supported me while we walked out. It took me a half an hour to get my strength back before I could walk on my own. That's what calcination can do. And so the introduction to calcination is this. Mine was incredibly powerful. And then we moved on to the temple of Isis on Philae. And you'll notice these steps. These steps are coming down from a gate into the back of the temple, and the Nile is just below them. And we sat on those steps and had a meditation. And I was breathing into this meditation. It was an oral one. She was speaking, and totally surrendered to the energy of this temple, Isis temple. And all of a sudden on my right, I had a vision of a Nubian woman, beautiful woman with full lips, dark skin. She had on one of those Egyptian caps that has the beads that flow down the hair. And she was breathing through her mouth. She go like that, in through her nose, out through her mouth. I knew she was Isis. And she was breathing life back into me after I had been burned to the ground. And that was the part that really cemented, really finalized that was the path I was going to go, the path of the goddess, the path of nature, the healing it provided us. And so when I got home, I searched. I did a search for nature spirituality. And Lisa Michaels is the first one that came up. And I began to study with her. This was her first experience with internet classes also. So I was the first in her priestess class. In her, she called it Nature 101, Nature 102. Then she started the priestess process. And I took her high priestess, and the 2 courses she offered as creation goddess. It was my introduction, and I wanted you to know how I came to this science. It is actually a science, and it was an incredible experience, and I've never felt anything like it since. But I have always worked with her, always worked with Sekhmet since this time, 2009. And she has definitely been with me. And I know she'll be with us now. It's very important to her. She wants to help. She wants to influence. She wants to support. Okay. Anything else to say about this?
Yes, I want to remind you that we figured out from the time that you were there in 2009 that the Venus synodic cycle was the Leo goddess synodic
goddess, right.
cycle. And it was the ascent phase. And without like going into all of the details to figure it out, it looked like it was during the window of this crown chakra activation on the ascent phase. So we had this huge, aha about what a
it
full
was.
circle moment that Sekhmet as a Leo goddess, your initiation during the Leo goddess journey, and now you bringing in this alchemical piece in the Leo goddess journey. It was just like a huge full circle moment.
It definitely was. Thank you for bringing that up. And I was born with Venus was at the crown chakra. So it is a very personal chakra to me too. And this was a very personal experience.
Yes, and I was born in the Venus cycle at the crown chakra as well. Maureen and I have lots of synchronicities between our charts, even being born 16 years apart and in two different parts of the country. It's amazing the synchronicities that we have, one of which is that we are both Scorpio goddesses. And as I said earlier, Scorpios are all about alchemy.
Yes, they are. Yes, absolutely. Okay, move on. Now, what is alchemy? I thought I'd talk a little bit about what it is really. And most simply, it is the art of transformation. In its simplest explanation, that's what it is. But it is far from simple. It is extremely complex. And it concerns with the underlying principles of how things change and transfer from one thing to another. It is called the great work. It is called the magnum opus. And it speeds up the natural process of perfection, which of course as humans we cannot reach, but we strive. And the ideal of spiritual development. And it activates hidden energies trapped in matter. I thought that was really an interesting way to look at it. Hidden energies trapped in matter. Its origins are in Egypt 5,000 years ago. It is on the edge between science and religion. In trying to understand the mysteries of matter and energy, alchemists discovered the very foundations of creation, and that is the common ground of all religions, sciences, philosophies, and psychologies. It is everything. I don't know that I can think of a discovery, a download, any more important than this. Because we are looking for transformation from the unconscious to the conscious. It's a fluid motion. It is forever moving from the terrestrial to the celestial and back to the terrestrial. And it continually flows back and forth, up and down, and it learns from us just as much as we learn from this. We are connected to the flow, and we need to learn to allow that flow to come through us. Now, there are lots of blocks, and that's what we're going to be working on with our alchemical part of this cycle. The internal work, just let me say a little bit about the internal work. We have to do it. There is no way to take a shortcut through this. It is 7 steps in order. But the thing to remember is that it is a living energy. So it's going to grow right along with us. So there may be changes to each of those steps, but they will never change the order. They must be done in the order that they were given. You may find that the feminine and the masculine elements within you will come together in a new way. It is also a harmonization of the hemispheres of the brain, which Sophia has worked with a lot with us, harmonizing the 2 spheres of the brain. So we're going to move towards unity consciousness. And remember, it is specific, and you have to engage it on your own. It cannot be done for you by anybody else. You must do the work. And this is, this is the emerald tablet that started it all. It was written or downloaded to Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice greatest. And there is more to it than this, but this is primarily the part of the emerald tablet that we will be working with. That which is below corresponds to that which is above. And that which is above corresponds to that which is below, to accomplish the miracle of the one thing. This is such an important part of the emerald tablets. You know, what is the one thing? It sounds kind of cryptic, but what alchemists have found with the one thing, particularly one called Maria Prophetessa, which we will get to later, is that the one thing is the prima materia. It is the first matter, and it can be chaotic. It is an intangible substance from which all is created. It is what we begin with. It is the philosopher's stone that we seek. It contains everything we need: the true and authentic self, the union of spirit, mind, and body. And that's what the philosopher's stone is. And you may be familiar with Harry Potter, and the very first book involved the philosopher's stone. And the myth around the philosopher's stone is that when created properly, that it will give everlasting life. And as we know, Voldemort in Harry Potter wanted everlasting life. He was not willing to do the work. He just wanted to profit from what other people do. And so as it came out, he was not successful in getting the stone. And he went on to find other things that were maybe he thought would prolong his life. But the true philosopher's stone is understanding the self. It is the spirit, mind, and body united in the unity field and the knowing of self. In order to find the philosopher's stone, you must turn and look at shadow. And that is one of the things that I wanted to talk about. No, first I'm going to talk about a little bit about the history of the emerald tablet. The tablet itself, it did exist, is a green crystalline structure or emerald. And it's not engraved, but it was in a bas relief. It stood out. You could feel it. One story is that Alexander the Great saw a green glow coming from a cave, and he went in and found the tablet and brought it to Egypt, where Alexandria was built, and the library was set up so that people could come and study. It was a beautiful library, and I wish it hadn't burned, but it did. The other story is that Hermes Trismegistus gave the emerald tablet to Moses for safekeeping, and Moses asked his sister Miriam to keep it for him. And she has been called Miriam or Mary the Jewess, or Maria Prophetessa, which is how I've always referred to her. And she was a premier alchemist in her day. And she had, her contribution, I think, was among the most important that we could possibly imagine. And this is an engraving of her, and you can't see, I think, oh, I can't see behind the gallery of our pictures, that she is pointing to an illustration of the above coming down and the below meeting it. And in the middle is the prima materia, from which all things are created. Is there anything you want to say about Maria Prophetessa before I go on?
There's nothing I want to say about Maria Prophetessa. What I would like to draw us back around to again is how you were describing that with alchemy, that it's a solitary process. You have to do the inner work yourself. And isn't it interesting that the star influencing this crown chakra, where we're beginning this alchemical process, is Alkes, the solitary one?
It is. Isn't that something? That is an amazing discovery. Thank you for that. Yeah, it can't be done in any other way. You have to do the work. And it is a very, very serious commitment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, Maria, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Maria Prophetessa lived in Alexandria, Egypt. And Alexandria at that time was the intellectual capital of the Roman Empire. We don't know a lot about her, but through fragments of her work, which were quoted by future alchemists, we know that she created the axiom of Maria. And this was, without a doubt, the most important contribution that she made to alchemy. It was a download. It was like a eureka moment from what alchemists have written about her. And like I said, we don't know a lot. Much of her work was burned in the library. But we do know that the axiom of Maria was a major, major discovery. And it sounds kind of cryptic, like, how do you make sense of this? And people have, devoted their lives to understanding this axiom of Maria. In fact, Carl Jung spent the last 30 years of his life studying alchemy and how it would relate to psychology. And this axiom comes up all the time in his work. He worked with it very, very, very closely and seriously. And so what it is one becomes two, two becomes three, and out of the third comes the one as the fourth. Now, Jung writes that from the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, we go to a fourth. He knew the fourth, and he said the fourth is Sophia. And I'm trying to think of this, and he called it a quaterno, a fourth, a foursome, you know, the fourth. And I was talking to Sophia Mona Lisa about how do we get to this? You know, how do we get Sophia within the Trinity? No, this is not how we do it. She found these slides, and this is the perfect illustration of the axiom. You have the Father as one, the Son two, the Holy Spirit three. That's the masculine principle. Then you have the daughter two, the Holy Soul, and then Mother one. And from this, we know that there were basically two trinities. And now, from consciousness, we join them together. And out of the third comes the one, the fourth, the quaternity. And it is the unified source field from which all is created. It is the perfect example of the balance between the feminine principle and the masculine principle. So you can see that it was an incredibly potent and powerful axiom that she was given to bring to the world. Let's see, where am I? It's really hard. I want to encourage you not to try to think about this from your mind, because the mind, the ego, wants to understand exactly how this happened, or if it indeed did. You might find that you're coming up with some doubts that this is actually what that axiom was designed to show us. So you have to get out of your mind and you have to start going to your heart. That's the only place this is going to happen for you. Otherwise, you're going to get mind cramps. You're going to be overwhelmed. I still am from time to time. You have to continually remind yourself to not go into your thinking process, the mind part. You get out of your mind, as they say, and go to your heart. And that's the unified source field from which all is created. And we will work with this. This is the prima material goal. This is what came from the prima materia. And I have to thank Sophia Mona Lisa for discovering that. That's her. She worked with it. She didn't put it together with the axiom until I started talking about it with her. But then as soon as I started talking about it, she knew exactly what it was. And she used put these slides together. And I can't thank you enough for doing that. It's brilliant work, just brilliant. You are truly an alchemist. Yes, one of the best. I wanted to say a little bit about Maria Prophetessa as a guide. When we were at the gathering at Sophia Mona Lisa, I always say her whole name, because we learn in Priestess process that not only is the new name, but it is also a vibration. So every time I say the whole name, Sophia Mona Lisa, I am invoking that vibration that is her essence. I just thought maybe I'd make clear that, because not everybody's had a priestess experience. my priestess name, by the way, is Sister of the Spiral Heart. Okay.
You
At
were
the
gonna tell us-
gathering.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
No, fine. Go ahead.
No, I was just reminding you that you were going to tell this story.
Yes, thank you. We were at the gathering, and there was channeling. Carol Billett, is that her last name? Carol Billett. She was doing channeling, and she is a gifted channeler. And we asked if she would invite Maria Prophetessa in to guide us and help us. And I believe she did. But Maria came in very, very reluctant to assist us. And what she said was, I'm researching. And she continued to say that every time a question was asked. Shh, I'm researching. And then finally she said, I'm researching DNA. And I thought, Eureka, what are we doing here? We are working with DNA. And I think that she will be happy to assist us as long as she knows we are serious about the process. Alchemists are very, very protective of their work. They don't share it with everybody. And in however way she shares with us, because I think she will now, she knows we're serious. And she's okay. So I am going to assume she's going to be a guide. And while I am not a channeler, sometimes I do get messages. And when I was working through the video journal that Sophia Mona Lisa did on what was happening in September, the September energies, when she said the portal of authority, I got an answer, I think, from her. And she said, there can be no personal authority through calcination unless all downloads of inferiority are burned and turned to ashes. Now, I would not have used inferiority had that been my thought. She used inferiority because she is considered the female opposite of Hermes. And when you work with Hermes, you work with Mercury. And a very important word in the Mercury cycle is inferior. And that's my validation. That's how I felt that I knew she truly was there and she was willing to help. I'm willing to listen. I'm very serious about this. I know that you are too. And as long as she's assured of that, I think she will help us. And there is nobody that would be a better guide than her. So, okay. Now we get to calcinations. It's a first step. Here are the 7 steps of alchemy. And as I said, you cannot skip. You must go through each one. You must do it yourself. You must do the work. But at the end, I expect you will find your philosopher's stone. So calcination, dissolution, separation, conjunction, fermentation, distillation, and coagulation. And they all have an element that goes with them. They all have planets that go with them. Calcination has Mars and Pluto. And And dissolution, that's water. And we will go into that when we get to that step. But it is a continual process. We're going to kind of snowball through this, because as we work with calcination now, and we burn to the ashes that which blocks us from our true authority of knowing self, our connection to source, and we move on, calcination will continue to go into the next step. While what we burned will go to dissolution, but we will also be engaging at the second gate, calcination. So we're going to kind of snowball through this until the end. We're actually working with all the steps at once, because they're all going to be in different stages. And I know that, you know, it's a lot of work. I am aware of it, but there is no other way. This is the way we do it. But I'm sure all of you will find that it is extremely powerful in your authority, in your sovereignty. Okay, so calcination starts. I love this slide because it shows the spiral that we'll be working on. We begin with calcinatio, right here. Yes, it is igniting the blaze, the swell, and consume. And then we will move to solutio, separatio, coagulatio, conjunctio, sublatio, multiplicatio, and finally coagulatio. Maybe I said that part. And then finally opus, the magnum opus. That's where the philosopher's stone lies. So if
Maureen, are you able to speak up or increase your volume, because you start to fade back in your voice?
Oh, I do that. My voice drops when I'm thinking of moving on to another topic. Okay, so we're going to be burning away during this month parts of our ego and attachments that are blocking us from our true source, from understanding ourselves and where our connection to source is. It comes straight into the crown. That is the only path. And so we know no new life can arise without the death of the old. And that's why it's not a very comfortable time. You have to understand that things are going to come up that you're not going to like. You don't want to look at them. We've spent lifetimes turning from our shadow because we don't want to see them. And it's not a bad thing, our shadow. It's not bad. It's just uncomfortable because it shows us where our blocks are. And that is the important part of shadow dancing. We're going to be doing that on a big scale in calcination. We're going to understand as they come up what those shadows are. And you must be aware that they will come up. There's no other way to get where you want to go. So I suggest as they come up, write them down immediately. Write them down. If it's a fear, if it's a hope that you feel won't come true, if it's let's see, if it's an anxiety, if it's a delusion, if it's a neuroses, all those things are going to come up big time. And I advise you to write them down, and write them down on separate pieces of paper as they come up. because in order to go to dissolution with these shadow pieces, we need to burn them. And we're going to burn them all in a ceremony that you can do on your own time. I'll explain a little bit about that when I get to the experiential piece. Yeah. Okay. So I think most of us know what the shadow is. We've been working with it very, very conscientiously, a good word, for a long time. But there will be new, because this is a growing and a living energy. So it will show you a new depth of your fears or your neuroses or your misunderstandings of how you have been programmed to believe a certain way. And those are very, very difficult to master, is looking at those and beginning the clearing process. I think that's it with the shadow.
So Maureen, I'd like to just take a quick moment to clarify something here before we move.
Sure.
on. Okay.
Sure.
So we're starting here at the crown chakra with this first step, calcination. So what will happen is the next gate will be at the third eye. When we activate the third eye, then we will start this entire process with calcination at the third eye. Meanwhile, the crown calcination work gets advanced to dissolution. Then the following month, we have a gate activation at the throat. So we will start the whole process again at the throat with calcination. Meanwhile, the third eye moves on to dissolution. Meanwhile, the crown moves on to separation. And so this is what she's referring to when she's talking about spirals within spirals, because at each chakra, as we make this descent journey, we will be going through every one of these 7 steps. So when we get to the heart, starting at calcination, the throat goes to dissolution, the third eye goes to separation, the crown goes to conjunction, and it just keeps rolling forward as we continually work all of this simultaneously, which is why it's freaking intense.
It's very intense. It's very intense. It is considered the fast path to the Philosopher's Stone, the fast path. So it comes on strong. Yeah. When do you want me to talk about the exercises?
When we get to that part after the break.
Okie dokie. Well, that's pretty much what I had. Unless there was some idea that I didn't bring up. Just remember that what you're doing is one of the most intense cycles you can go through. It is a massive undertaking. I don't want to underestimate it in any way. And remember too that alchemy has become a spiritual buzzword. And there are so many websites and so many people that are devoted to alchemy, but it isn't the true alchemy. They don't go through the steps. They are taking the fast, they're trying to get around all the work, and they think they can get you to love and the Philosopher's Stone without going through these steps, but they can't. So be aware that alchemy is ancient and there are false prophets. And you want to use your discernment if you begin to research this, because you don't want to get caught up in that mess. The same thing happened to sovereignty, if you remember. As we were all trying to claim our sovereignty, it became a buzzword, and now everybody uses sovereignty, but not everybody understands it. They just think they do. So be very careful to be authentic in your work. And that, I believe, was what Maria Prophetessa was trying to tell us, is that, she had to be sure that we were not just a fly-by-night group who really didn't want to do the work. That was her main goal, I think, when she first encountered us.
Yeah. Yeah. Because she was a little kind of sarcastic with us, wasn't she?
She was a little sarcastic because she thought we were involved in what some people would call airy-fairy, foo-foo stuff.
Right.
She just didn't realize exactly who we were. And I feel that she wanted to see before she committed that we were serious.
So I just wanted to bring us back to the group view, because what Maureen shared on alchemy was a huge piece. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to ask any clarifying questions or anything that you need to do, because I have one more piece on this before we take the break. So does anybody have anything they'd like to ask Maureen right now? Okay.
Also, I would like to just quickly bring up that the earth is in calcification now. She is going through her own calcification. There are fires out of control everywhere. We recently saw Maui. We recently saw Kilauea, on Hawaii, the huge volcano that rushed down the mountain and took out villages. I mean, people's homes and all kinds of things. The earth is in calcination. And also within your body, you may feel it. Your temperature may go up. You may have a hot flash. Oh yeah, we thought we were done with that. I had another hot flash. Well, some of us are done with that, but I had a hot flash this morning, sitting here getting ready to do this. So your body might experience a rise in temperature. So, just be ready. Whatever comes, embrace it and learn from it. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood what they were seeing and what they were feeling.
Thank you so much, Maureen. That was spectacular. I'm going to go back to the slides, and I'm going to go back to through the rest of them as quickly as I can, because I know we've been here a while. The reason I put this slide up about Jung's alchemical phases is twofold. It's kind of a transition slide because, as Maureen said, Jung has done a lot of work on alchemy. Maureen has been a prolific reader of Jung's work on alchemy, and he talks about these four phases: Negretto, Albedo, Citronitis, and Rubedo. The black phase, the white phase, the yellow phase, the red phase. I love that he is kind of like showing us alchemy, because he was also the person responsibility for bringing astrology into psychoanalysis. And he says astrology, like the collective unconscious with which psychology is concerned, consists of symbolic configurations. The planets are the gods, symbols of the powers of unconscious. Now, the reason why this is important is because we're going to bring in the Mercury piece. Remember what Maureen said. Hermes is also known as Mercury. Okay. Now, in the Hermetic work, which is fascinating that Jung speaks to this, it's in Hermeticisms, there's three parts. There's the astrology, there's the alchemy, and there's theurgy. And so the fact that Jung was tapped into the astrology and alchemy parts that we know of, because he's spoken to it, clearly sends a symbol to me that he was a Hermetic. This book here by Gary P. Caton, Hermetica Triptycha, and let me stop the share so I can show it to you. I highly recommend this book. Hold on a second. And let me change the view. Okay, this is the book, Hermetica Triptycha. This book, written by Gary P. Caton, is on the luminary body, Mercury. Mercury also as a god, one of the three forms of the cosmic messenger. First it was Thoth in Egypt, then it was Hermes, and then it was Mercury. And of course, we have the luminary body, Mercury. This book is all about the Mercury synodic cycle, and it's deeply steeped in the alchemy that's related to the Mercury synodic cycle. And I'm not going to read through this. Quickly show you that the astrological glyph for Mercury has three parts. We've got the cross of matter, we've got the circle of spirit, and we have the crescent soul. This goes back to what Maureen was saying about the alignment of, what did you say? Body, mind, and spirit. I don't remember. How did you say that, Maureen?
Yeah, it's mind, body, spirit.
Mind, body, spirit. This is the alignment. Gary talks about this alignment that is built into the glyph. The alchemy is built into the glyph. And in the alchemical piece, you need to know in order to understand, I'm sorry, I'm trying to move through this, that there are 4 key events in the Mercury synodic cycle that lasts about 60 days. You're going to have at least 3 complete cycles a year. This year, we're having 4. There's the superior conjunction when Mercury and the sun come together above the horizon, the evening elongation, which happens before Mercury goes retrograde and goes into the underworld, which is the inferior conjunction, which is where Mercury and the sun come together. And then the morning elongation, which completes the cycle, which is when Mercury and the sun come out of the underworld and show up above the horizon. This inferior conjunction is the key alchemical point. You've been hearing me talk about this. It's that alignment that happens. It's the most potent alchemical point of the entire Mercury retrograde period. Now, what's interesting is that Gary discovered, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, that between the movement of the superior conjunctions in the sky, you get the upward facing triangle. And with the movement of the downward of the inferior conjunction and those points, you get the downward facing triangle. So here's the alchemy built in again, just as Sophia or Maria Prophetessa spoke to. Out of the 4th comes the 1. Out of the 3rd comes the 1, which is the 4th, which is this union of the upward facing and downward facing triangles. This contribution by Gary is spectacular. We know that Venus, as she makes her movement through the sky over 8 years, makes the sign of the rose. Now we know that Mercury, through his synodic cycles, is making the sign of the star tetrahedrons, so to speak. So that's very, very important to understand. Okay, the other reason why that Jung slide was significant is because on the alchemical piece in Hermetica Triptycha, he uses these phases. For some reason along the way, the current day alchemists have dropped that yellow phase. And what Gary has done is he's taken the black phase, the white phase, the red phase, and he has aligned them with these 3 events of the Mercury synodic cycle. So the Negretto, this is where you start, happens at the evening elongation before Mercury goes into the underworld. The Albedo happens at that inferior conjunction point when you've got the alignment, and the Rubetto happens at the morning elongation, which is the close of that cycle when the Mercury and the sun come above the horizon. Now, the other thing is Joseph Campbell has 3 phases to the hero's journey, which is very, very popular. Also, as Maureen spoke to the Harry Potter reference with the Philosopher's Stone, the hero's journey is built into that entire series of books. Joseph Campbell has it in 3 phases. separation, initiation, and return. And Gary Caton has tied the Negretto and the evening elongation event to separation, the albedo phase with the inferior conjunction event to the initiation of the hero's journey, and the rubedo with the morning elongation event to the return phase of the hero's journey. So all of that wisdom is kind of in the background, and we'll be bringing in the pieces around the Mercury inferior conjunction, which is why they're built into that slide that I showed you of the entire 19 months, which is why for those of you that have already had your 12-strand DNA reading, I included the most recent Mercury inferior conjunction information, which just happened on September 6th in Virgo. Our next one will happen on the winter solstice in Capricorn. That's really huge. So at this point, again, want to give you just one last opportunity to ask any questions about anything that we've shared. So Maureen's going to be doing the whole alchemical part, taking us through the phases, and I'm going to be bringing in the alchemical part from the Mercury synodic cycle point of view. So you can see this is a massive shift from what we've been doing in the past. Any comments at all?
I think it's terrific. Thanks, ladies. It's terrific.
Thank you, Helen.
Just a wonderful way of pulling everything together that probably all of us know in our memories, but we just have to remember it. Remember it.
Right, exactly. Okay, great. Thank you, Karen. All right, so let me go back here. A couple more slides. All right. The 15th strand of DNA activation is going to happen on October 10th, next month. It's happening at the third eye, which is called the portal of perception. And we're going to be doing our ceremony the Sunday before October 8th. Now, I've already sent you ladies the full list of all the ceremonial dates in an email as an attachment. I'm also going to post it to Patreon, so you'll have it there to reference. So it's a good idea to maybe print it out and hang it up near your workspace, or even update your calendar for all of the ceremonial dates. All right, so for everybody that's watching this replay, I want to say thank you very, very much. I appreciate you watching this, and we will see you next month.